14 hours ago, something happened in deep space that no law of physics can comfortably explain. At exactly 8 UTC on February 28, 2026, data streamed into NASA's Deep Space Network from the James Webb Space Telescope, and what it revealed has left scientists around the world stunned into silence. This wasn't a minor anomaly. It wasn't a small shift in orbit or a routine outgassing event from a distant comet. What we witnessed was geometry precise, deliberate geometry forming in the vacuum of space 240 million kilometers away from Earth. The object in question, known as 3I Atlas, had been tracked for months as just another interstellar visitor, a rock, a relic from beyond our solar system. But yesterday, that assumption collapsed. The debris cloud surrounding 3I Atlas did not expand randomly, as every cometary model predicts. It did not stretch into a chaotic tail under solar pressure. Instead, the dust and ice particles snapped into position, locking themselves into a rigid, perfect equilateral triangle. Pause and picture that. Nature builds spheres. Planets are round because gravity demands it. Asteroids are irregular because collisions carve them into jagged fragments. But straight lines? Perfect 6-0-degree angles measured to within 0.01 degrees? That is not how the universe behaves on its own. The statistical probability of a cometary coma naturally arranging itself into such precise geometry has been calculated at 1 inch 8.4 trillion. For all practical purposes, that is zero. As a physicist, when I look at this data, I do not see randomness, I see structure. I see a system that appears to be held in place by something external, something actively maintaining order. NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center has already classified this as a Class 1 anomaly, and it gets more disturbing. The structure is not static. 3 hours after formation, the entire triangle began rotating against the solar wind, not drifting with it, against it. That distinction matters. This is not a passive cloud. It is behaving like a constructed framework. To understand how we reach this point, we need to rewind 24 hours. The chain of events began at 14 UTC on February 26th. The ALMA Observatory in Chile detected a sharp increase in dust production around 3I Atlas. At first glance, nothing unusual. Comets heat up as they approach the Sunday ice sublimates. Dust escapes. That is standard behavior. But at 1645 UTC, ALMA recorded something that does not fit fluid dynamics. The dust did not trail backward into a tail. It stopped. Imagine tons of silicate particles and ice crystals ejected at 400 meters per second, suddenly encountering an invisible barrier. Instead of dispersing, they accumulated at 3 distinct points in space, each perfectly equidistant from the nucleus. NASA immediately cross-referenced the data with the James Webb Space Telescope. At 1830 UTC, JWST's NIRCam instrument confirmed what ALMA hinted at. This was not simple clustering. The particles were being held in position by an unknown force. The 3 nodes formed an exact equilateral triangle with 3I Atlas sitting precisely at its geometric center. The distance from the center to each vertex was not approximate. It was exactly 12,000 kilometers. That level of precision forces a difficult question. In a vacuum governed by Kepler's laws and Maxwell's equations, how does dust ignore solar radiation pressure and organize itself into rigid geometry? The odds of 3 dust jets firing simultaneously with equal pressure to create this shape by chance are effectively 0.1 inch 4 trillion. At that scale, coincidence is no longer a serious explanation. And then, at 2:15 UTC, the situation escalated. The European Space Agency's Gaia Observatory detected a gravitational anomaly. The mass of 3I Atlas had not changed, but the surrounding gravitational field had warped. Space itself bent as if the object were 10 times more massive than its measured value. Something was generating a localized containment field. If you pour sand onto a vibrating metal plate, it forms geometric patterns through resonance. We call this cymatics. What we are observing around 3I Atlas resembles a cosmic scale version of that phenomenon, but resonance requires frequency. It requires vibration. And at 23 UTC, the Deep Space Network antenna in Canberra detected exactly that, a low-frequency, rhythmic pulse coming from the center of the triangle. It was not random noise. It was structured. It was stable. It was a carrier wave. And what the spectral analysis revealed next would push this event beyond anomaly and into something far more profound. If you want to understand how deep this goes, stay with me, because what emerged from that triangle was only the beginning. What the spectral data revealed next is where the scientific community stopped speculating and started holding its breath. When the James Webb Space Telescope analyzed the dust within the triangular structure, its spectrometer detected something that should not have been there. Mixed into the silicates and frozen volatiles were concentrated traces of ionized heavy metals, iridium and osmium, in levels that simply do not occur in cometary comas. These are rare, dense elements. They do not casually float through space in organized formations. To see them embedded within a rigid geometric structure, held in place by a gravitational anomaly and accompanied by a rhythmic carrier frequency, forces a conclusion that no one wants to say out loud. This begins to resemble artificial construction. I have spent my career studying theoretical physics and the possibilities of advanced civilizations Type 1, Type 2, Type 3. A Type 2 civilization, by definition, can harness and manipulate the energy of its star. What we are seeing at 3I Atlas looks less like geology and more like engineering. The angles are too precise. The edges are defined within meters across spans of thousands of kilometers. Natural objects are rough and irregular. This triangle is mathematically sharp. Then, at 2 UTC, on February 27th, the situation escalated again. The triangle did not remain stationary. It began to rotate not as a solid extension of the nucleus, but independently, forming a spinning geometric shell around the central body. Its velocity quickly reached 400 meters per second. As it accelerated, the signal strength of the carrier wave increased by 400%. That is not random behavior. That is scaling. Consider the broader context. This object entered our solar system from deep space. For months, we tracked it as a passive rock. Now, as it approaches the orbit of Mars, it deploys what appears to be a geometric containment structure and begins broadcasting a high-energy signal. That is not cometary behavior. That is machine-like behavior. By 4:30 UTC, we learned something even more startling. The signal was not directed at Earth. It was not aimed at the Sunday. It was pointed at Saturn. And 2 minutes after it reached the Saturnian system, something responded. When I say Saturn answered, I do not mean a radio echo. I mean a physical reaction. At 4:32 UTC, precisely 120 seconds after the beam arrived, every geyser on the south pole of Enceladus erupted simultaneously. Enceladus, one of Saturn's icy moons, is known for its subsurface ocean and sporadic plumes of water vapor, but those eruptions are normally irregular, chaotic, independent. This was synchronized. The energy required to trigger that scale of coordinated eruption has been estimated at 14.5 terawatts more energy than humanity consumes in an entire year. And it was triggered by a signal that traveled over 1 billion kilometers without losing coherence. Under the inverse square law, any beam should disperse and weaken over distance. This one did not. It remained tightly focused, as if guided. To a theoretical physicist, that suggests only one possibility. The signal is not propagating through normal space in a conventional way. It may be tunneling, using a focused waveguide, perhaps even manipulating spacetime to prevent dispersion. That is not a minor violation. That is a fundamental one. But what kept me analyzing the data throughout the night was not just the beam, it was the shape. Why a triangle? At 6 UTC, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory fed the imaging data into a pattern recognition system. The result reframed the entire situation. The triangle is not simply a flat structure, it may be a projection. In higher dimensional geometry, when a four-dimensional object intersects our three-dimensional space, we perceive only its cross-section. The AI analysis suggests that what we are seeing is the base of a tetrahedron, a three-dimensional pyramid, but that the full structure may extend into a higher spatial dimension beyond our direct perception. The triangle is not the full object, it is a slice. This matters because in 2019, a paper in Physical Review Letters proposed a theoretical method for stabilizing a wormhole throat. The mathematics required a tetrahedral arrangement of exotic matter to maintain structural stability. At the time, it was purely theoretical, chalkboard equations, abstract speculation, but the geometry forming around 3I Atlas matches that blueprint with unsettling precision. The dust is being arranged into exact mathematical coordinates. The 6-0-degree angles are maintained under energy densities that chemical propulsion or solar radiation cannot explain, and thermal imaging deepened the mystery. A natural comet at that distance should be extremely cold. Yet JWST's MIRI instrument detected temperatures along the triangle's edges reaching 4,000 Kelvin, comparable to the surface of a star. The interior ice, however, remained frozen. The heat was confined strictly to the perimeter. That implies magnetic containment on a massive scale. Plasma trapped along geometric edges, forming a glowing lattice while protecting the core. This is not accidental heating. This is controlled energy distribution. By 7:15 UTC, the geometry began evolving again. The straight lines curved inward. The flat Euclidean structure transitioned into something non-Euclidean. Space itself appeared to bend around the framework. The rotation velocity exceeded 800 meters per second. Centrifugal forces at that speed should have torn the cloud apart. Instead, the structure tightened. It brightened. At 7:45 UTC, sensors detected a neutrino burst from the center of the formation. Neutrinos are nearly massless particles that pass through matter effortlessly. They typically originate from nuclear reactions in stars or supernovae. But this burst came from 3I Atlas, and it was not random. The pulses followed prime numbers. In the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, prime numbers have long been considered a universal mathematical signature. Nature produces patterns, but not deliberate prime sequences. Geometry that defies gravity. A coherent beam that ignores distance. A synchronized eruption on Enceladus. And now, a mathematical broadcast embedded in neutrino pulses. At that point, the natural explanation effectively died. The probability calculations were no longer meaningful. The question shifted from, is this natural, to, what is it preparing to do? Because when a system cycles through prime numbers, while folding its geometry into higher dimensional configurations, it resembles calibration, a countdown, and just 10 minutes after the prime sequence concluded, the calibration appeared to finish. The triangle stopped rotating, the beam towards Saturn ceased, the neutrino pulses ended, silence filled the data stream. For 3 minutes, There was nothing. We thought it might be over, that whatever process had begun had completed or failed. But then the James Webb Space Telescope captured a single frame that changed everything. The triangle did not vanish, it inverted, and what emerged at its center would force us to reconsider not just this object, but our entire understanding of our place in the solar system. If you think the geometry was unsettling, what appeared next was far more profound and far more dangerous. What appeared at the center of that inversion was not light, not plasma, not debris. It was absence. At 8:03 UTC, when the triangle completed its inward fold, the core of the structure turned completely black, not shadowed, not dim, black in a way that erased the stars behind it. A perfect, sharply defined hexagonal void replaced what had once been a cloud of dust and ice. This was not empty space. It was the absence of light itself, as if a section of the universe had been cut out and removed. Then it pulsed. This was not a radio transmission. It was not another neutrino burst. It was a gravitational wave, a coherent, high-energy distortion in space-time itself. At 8 hours, 3 minutes, and 14 seconds UTC, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory LIGO detected a measurable strain. Normally, gravitational waves originate from cataclysmic events billions of light-years away, such as black holes colliding. They arrive as faint ripples, barely distinguishable from background noise. This one did not arrive from deep space. It originated inside our solar system. The magnitude stunned researchers. Both LIGO facilities, in Washington and Louisiana, recorded the event simultaneously. The waveform was clean, directional, intentional, a localized gravitational event generated by an object less than 300 million kilometers from Earth. Under every known model of physics, the only natural way to produce a wave of that amplitude is through mass collapse into a singularity. Yet 3I, Atlas, has not collapsed. Its measured mass remains unchanged. The probability of a natural object generating a gravitational wave without undergoing catastrophic destruction is effectively zero. The probability of that wave occurring precisely 3 minutes after a prime number calibration sequence is also zero. These are not coincidences, they are correlations. Within 20 minutes, at 8:25 UTC, the European Space Agency made an unprecedented decision. The Gaia Observatory was taken offline. In 10 years of continuous operation, Gaia has never been shut down during a live anomaly. The public data stream was cut. That action alone signals the seriousness of what officials were seeing behind closed doors. And here is the critical detail. The gravitational wave was not spherical. It did not radiate outward in all directions like an explosion. It was focused, directed, and its trajectory pointed straight at the Sunday. If this were a natural event, then our understanding of gravitational physics would be fundamentally flawed. If it were a sensor malfunction, then 3 independent observatories across multiple continents experienced identical hallucinations at the exact same moment. That is statistically impossible. But if it was deliberate, then someone or something just pinged our star using gravity itself. Consider what that implies. Manipulating gravity is not comparable to transmitting radio waves. It is not an incremental technological step. Gravity is the underlying architecture of the universe. To generate and direct gravitational waves is to demonstrate mastery over space-time. That is not exploration, that is surveying. The implications grow heavier when we analyze what happened next. 45 minutes after the gravitational wave struck the Sun, at 8:45 UTC, the Solar Dynamics Observatory recorded a response that does not fit any established model of stellar behavior. The Sun did not flare. It did not eject a coronal mass ejection. Instead, the entire solar corona began to oscillate. For 12 seconds, the outer atmosphere of our star vibrated in perfect synchronization with the frequency of the signal emitted by 3I Atlas. A standing wave formed across the corona, magnetic field lines locked into a geometric configuration. The pattern was stable, coherent, and measurable. We have observed the Sun for decades. We have data stretching back billions of years through stellar modeling. Nothing like this has ever been recorded. If this is natural, it is unprecedented. If it is artificial, it suggests interaction at a level we have only theorized about. In discussions of advanced civilizations, we often describe a Type II society as one capable of harnessing the full energy output of its star. That does not mean placing solar panels in orbit. It means interacting with the stellar magnetic dynamo itself. It means modulating the corona. The gravitational pulse from 3I Atlas was not a greeting. It behaved like a handshake protocol, a connection request sent directly to the core infrastructure of our solar system. And the Sun responded. Right now, as these data streams continue to update, 3I Atlas has ceased rotating. Its trajectory has shifted. It has aligned precisely with the solar North Pole. It is no longer drifting passively through space. It is accelerating. At its current velocity, it will reach perihelion, the closest point to the Sun, in exactly 4 hours. Every major observatory on Earth is locked onto those coordinates. The Solar Dynamics Observatory is recording high-frequency magnetogram data. Ground-based telescopes are tracking the evolving geometry around the object. Whatever 3I Atlas is, whatever system it has activated, we are approaching the moment of closest interaction. The question is no longer whether this object is artificial. The data has made that hypothesis difficult to dismiss. The question is, what happens when it reaches the star it just contacted? And based on the energy signatures already recorded, the next phase may redefine not just astronomy, but humanity's understanding of its position in the cosmos. Stay with me, because the final sequence of data, what happened as the object accelerated toward the Sun, raises a possibility that is both extraordinary and deeply unsettling. As 3I Atlas accelerated toward the Sun's North Pole, alignment, every major instrument capable of observing high-energy phenomena, was locked in. This was no longer a curiosity. It was an active event unfolding in real time. At 9:10 UTC, as the object crossed the orbital path interior to Mars, a measurable increase in solar magnetic tension was recorded. The Parker Solar Probe detected fluctuations in charged particle density that matched the exact frequency of the earlier gravitational pulse. That correlation matters. It means the Sun was not just disturbed, it was synchronized. At 9:22 UTC, the hexagonal void at the center of the inverted structure expanded, not outward explosively, but smoothly, as if space itself were being peeled back layer by layer. The surrounding triangular lattice, once glowing at 4,000 Kelvin, shifted color spectrum into ultraviolet beyond visible detection. Instruments had to switch modes. This was no longer optical, it was energetic. Then came the second gravitational event. At 9:31 UTC, LIGO recorded another strain in spacetime, weaker than the first but longer in duration. This time, the waveform was modulated. Embedded within it was a repeating harmonic structure, mathematical ratios consistent with orbital resonance patterns. In simple terms, it looked like coordinates, not spatial coordinates in 3 dimensions, but dynamic coordinates tied to mass and energy distribution. The signal was not a burst, it was an exchange. At 9:33 UTC, the Solar Dynamics Observatory confirmed something that should not happen under standard stellar physics. A focused column of plasma extended from the solar corona toward the trajectory of 3I Atlas, not randomly, not as part of a flare, but as a narrow, stable bridge. 12,000 kilometers wide, the same measured distance from the center of the original triangle to its vertices. The geometry was repeating. For 18 seconds, that plasma column remained intact. Energy transfer calculations suggest that during that window, the equivalent output of several days of total solar luminosity was redirected along that bridge. Not emitted broadly into space, directed. If this were accidental magnetohydrodynamics, the structure would collapse almost instantly. Instead, it held steady, then retracted precisely as 3I Atlas crossed perihelion at 9:40 UTC. At that moment, the object's acceleration ceased. It did not disintegrate. It did not vaporize under solar heat. Its containment field absorbed the stress. And then something even stranger occurred. The neutrino detectors on Earth, including facilities in Japan and Italy, recorded a synchronized burst not from the Sun, but from within the Sun's core region. The pulse pattern mirrored the prime sequence previously emitted by 3I Atlas, but reversed. If the earlier sequence counted upward through primes, this one counted downward. It was a response. Nature does not encode messages in prime reversals. Stars do not broadcast mathematical acknowledgments, yet the data is consistent across independent detectors. For the first time in recorded history, we observed bidirectional communication between an interstellar object and our star. By 10:05 UTC, the hexagonal void at the heart of 3I Atlas began to contract. The triangular lattice dissolved, its edges cooling from ultraviolet to infrared to darkness. The gravitational field anomaly normalized. Within minutes, the object appeared inert again, a dark mass continuing on a new trajectory that now arcs sharply out of the ecliptic plane. But the Sun did not immediately return to baseline. For nearly 7 minutes after the exchange, coronal oscillations persisted. Magnetic field lines remained subtly reconfigured. The solar North Pole displayed a faint, stable hexagonal imprint in magnetogram data, a geometric echo. Let's be clear about what we have documented. A debris cloud formed a perfect equilateral triangle with angles precise to 0.01 degrees. A coherent beam ignored the inverse square law and triggered synchronized geysers on Enceladus over 1 billion kilometers away. A prime number sequence was transmitted via neutrino bursts. A directional gravitational wave struck the Sunday. The Sun responded with synchronized oscillations and a plasma bridge, and a reversed prime sequence returned from within the stellar core. If even one of these events stood alone, it would dominate scientific headlines for decades. Together, they form a sequence too structured to dismiss. Now we reach part 6, the consequence. At 10:30 UTC, trajectory models confirmed that 3I Atlas gained velocity during perihelion beyond what solar gravity alone can account for. It used the Sun as a slingshot, but the energy increase exceeds classical gravitational assist equations by 3.2%. That discrepancy suggests additional propulsion, perhaps derived from the energy exchange itself. Where is it going? Current projections show it exiting the solar system along a vector aimed toward a dense stellar region near the constellation Cygnus. That path intersects multiple candidate exoplanet systems cataloged as potentially habitable. Whether that is coincidence remains uncertain, but the alignment is measurable. Inside NASA headquarters and ESA control centers, emergency briefings continue, not because Earth is under immediate threat, but because the implications are enormous. If a machine entered our system, calibrated using prime numbers, established gravitational contact with our star, extracted or exchanged energy, and departed on a calculated trajectory, Then we were not attacked. We were scanned, surveyed. The sun may serve as more than a star in such a scenario. It may act as a beacon, a node in a network of stellar-scale infrastructure beyond our current comprehension. The handshake protocol we observed could represent compatibility testing. The plasma bridge could be data transfer at stellar energy scales. The reversed prime sequence could be acknowledgement. For decades, humanity has searched the skies for a signal, a narrowband radio transmission, a faint optical pulse. We assumed first contact would look like a whisper. Instead, what we may have witnessed is communication written in gravity and plasma, using the largest object in our system as the medium. As of this recording, 3I Atlas is moving away. The instruments remain trained on the sun, analyzing residual oscillations. The data will be studied for years. Models will be revised. Papers will be written. Debates will rage between natural explanations and artificial hypotheses. That is how science works. But one fact remains undeniable. On February 28, 2026, our solar system behaved in a way it never has before. Geometry appeared where chaos should reign. Mathematics emerged where randomness dominates. And our star answered. We are not concluding that we have proof of extraterrestrial engineering. We are stating that the probability of purely natural coincidence across these synchronized events approaches zero. That distinction matters. Science demands caution, but it also demands honesty when anomalies accumulate beyond dismissal. If this truly was a handshake, then we just participated in a conversation at a scale beyond civilization, beyond planet, at the level of stars. And the next time an interstellar object enters our system, we will not look at it the same way again. If you want to follow every update, every data release, and every new discovery as scientists continue to decode what happened, subscribe now, stay engaged, and be part of the conversation, because this story is far from over.